My apologies, I accidentally pressed the live button. I'm Master Leaky. I had the great fortune of studying directly under Dr. Jubb and being received of his unpublished works that I am going to share with you the first chapter today, and I'll do what I can to read it clearly and and continue on with the whole book. Jubb's Body Flora 2. Life Colloidal Bioterrain and a True Healing Therapeutic by Dr. David Jubb, Ph.D. August 12, 2006. Table of Contents. Chapter 1 is Colloid of Life and Life Colloid, the primary element of a cell. Taurus. Section 1, Body Flora. Colloid of Life and Life Colloid, the primary element of a cell. Germ theory is a present medical paradigm that disease was caused because of a microbe. That paradigm is other than based in science. Pasteur of pasteurization cooked the truth. Pasteur did an experiment where life was found 3 days after looking through a microscope. Yet he mostly denied that. Organic material devoid of a cell can have cells arise. A living organism, life colloidal conglomeration, arising from inorganic substance is called ambiogenesis. Life colloid arising from organic matter, heterogenesis. All organism and semi-organism, spore, is made up of colloid of life. Colloid of life are the building block of life colloid as spore, as in DNA and RNA. Colloid of life appear under a powerful microscope as tiny pinpricks of light that dance around. They can be found in blood, plant, rock, and animal. A colloid of life is a subcellular building block of all life and is the primary precursor material that allow DNA and RNA to arise. A colloid of life is ultramicroscopic primordial cellular material. Life exists as we know it as a result of colloid of life. Living organism only has life vicariously as a result of the eternity of colloid of life and life colloid it is composed of. A colloid of life is indestructible, and at the death of its host, it returns to the earth to live eternally. Colloid of life have a negative electrical charge. Change. The world of the life colloid. Colloidal biology is the study of colloid of life, which are the smallest building blocks of life. Colloid of life compose all life as life colloid, as spore, organelle, cell, bacteria, mold, fungus, and yeast. Life taps energy from its environment to pump disorder out. A life colloid is capable of memory, growth, reproduction, and repair. It is easy for us to consider complex things we can see, like a dog, cat, squirrel, or insect, as an organism of life. Yet, a life colloid inside the cell is part of its machinery and is also a separate, distinct life organism in colloidal biology. These organelles, as life colloid, as mitochondria, have their own reproductive schedule. Life colloid, friendly life colloid. Life colloid making up blood and body cells live in symbiosis and assist to maintain body homeostasis. For instance, body flora life colloid, as fibrin, grow a vine-like net when clotting blood. Cell lysosomes clean the interior of a cell. Mitochondria break nutrient down into energy, and life colloidal intestinal flora play a critical role in vitamin and mineral formation and biological transmutation. What is a life colloid? A life colloid is the building block of a cell and all life in colloidal biology. A life colloid can be a very primitive spore without nucleic acid, as an extremophile, and nano-life colloidal spore, and it can be a cell of a larger organism, or it can be a bacteria, mold, fungi, and or yeast, and a building block of these life forms. A life colloid is made up out of colloid of life, which are clusters of biophotons. Life colloid surf space. Colloid of life as aggregates of biophoton are highly impressionable to radiant forms of energy. Life colloid is found within meteorite deposit on the Earth. Life colloid find it easy to hitchhike a ride on natural objects and ice that travel tube-like channels between celestial bodies. Thousands of years can pass, yet that's only a second of God's time. For all deposited on Earth, the journeying across space has freely occurred without expenditure of any fossil fuel. Celestial debris, including asteroid, meteorite, and comet, can all have matter land on Earth. As low-energy pathway exists in the human body, they also exist in space. Predictable routes follow low-energy paths through space. Beyond a three-dimensional world is surfaces involving gravitational waves and fields. An asteroid and comet can enter a celestial gateway in between the moon and the Earth's orbit. In this way, comets deposit solid matter on Earth. Water is abundant in our galaxy and even within our solar system. Looking electronically for substance in our galaxy, one can find the chemical for candy, even vodka. Interstellar cross-pollination of life through panspermia, spore crossing space, is part of Earth's inspiration and expiration into space and life's universal existence. Spore rain in on the Earth through low-energy portals. Interplanetary energy waves as currents lead colloid of life and life colloid to be astrally transported. As blood flows before a heart is formed, electrical, thermal, mechanical, and gravitic current govern the motion of fluid. Water can even gush out at the top of a mountain peak. Tubes of low energy pathway exist in the Earth, human body, and interstellar space. Tubes carrying interstellar matter is mostly evaporated through portal gates between the Moon and the Earth. This celestial portal has allowed Earth's mantle and atmosphere to be cross-pollinated. Panspermia occurs with Earth's inspiration and expiration into space through this portal. Earth's atmosphere loses and gains water and hydrogen and debris, along with colloid of life that can have orbited several of the moons of other planets. Low-energy tubes deliver colloid of life and life colloid between water-bearing astral bodies, like Earth and Jupiter's water-bearing moons, Callisto, Europa, and Ganymede. Paths taken by valence electrons in the body follow along similar tubular pathways of galactic low energy. It's like water finding its own level. Either it is spinning in and up and has levity, or it is spinning down and out and has weight. Either way, a colloid is drawn along low-energy tubular vortexes. A tadpole's tail on Earth arises as does a galactic tail, bridging 500,000 light-years, only for the tadpole. This is occurring on a microscopic level very near in time and space. Tube-like conduit exists between all material that has been brought together. Even as a galaxy interacts strongly with another galaxy. Tube-like conduit of energy exists in the body as Nardi points. Low-energy tubes in a similar way connect us to all neighboring astral bodies. Distant stars in heaven were much closer to our sun yesterday than today. Invisible low-energy tubes exchange and channel energy and colloid of life throughout space and deep inside self. This is you as the moon and the sun are organs of self. These natural paths allow journeying vast distance without any fuel expenditure. And a 3 gigahertz wave can have passed right through you and the Earth and have missed everything by at least a quarter of a mile. Celestial portal tubes transport cosmic solar and lunar material along with hydrogen atom, mineral gas, and colloid of life and life colloid, and all can leave and enter Earth's atmosphere. This occurs as tubes connect, sometimes during various sun, earth, and moon cycles. A message in a bottle cast into the sea is set freely upon by ocean current. The bottle with its message can end up on the shore of a very distant continent. Meteorite, asteroid, comet, and Earth all move within a current in a sea of cosmic energy. Fuel was other than needed to transport the message in a bottle this vast distance. All Earth material, the animate and inanimate, is merely a gradient level of cosmic energy. A colloid of life as a biophoton cluster is also a gradation of cosmic energy. Colloid of life and life colloid can surf current in space. Extreme heat, cold, radiation, and chemical, they can easily survive. The tiniest seed on Earth can float in the upper stratosphere and have perfectly survived the radiation of that. It can have circled up there for thousands of years in suspended animation. Only as when it combines with an algae is it heavy enough to float back down. Only upon this union of symbiosis is electricity is given to the seed. And finally, moisture and fertile soil, and then an orchid can burst forward. Spore can pass through the interior of a tree and eventually express its fruiting body as a mushroom. Extremophiles, as life colloid, can endure the most extreme condition. Even the tar from bitumen road paving through it has been through extreme heat, is alive with organisms, and these organisms will eat the tar of the road and disintegrate all back to colloid of life as dust. From dust we come, and dust we return. Colloid of life are whirlpools in the ether. They are biophoton conglomerations. All of life is made up of biophoton. A colloid of life as such is eternal. It has life eternally. All of life on earth is fashioned from this biophoton mat. All life is a symbiosis of life colloid. Transpermia is the exchange of life colloid between celestial bodies. Life colloids surf space through tubes of invisible low energy current. This is life hitchhiking around the universe. Mutual assistance of symbiosis of life colloid and panspermia can easily explain how only 10 million years passed by and jaws and claws suddenly appeared 543 million years ago. The ancestors of crayfish and iguanas. A life colloid as a spore delivered to the earth by low energy vortexes can have eventually incubated and crystallized catalytically. Other life colloid symbiotically grew into the environment and sub-environment, all fashioned individual life forms arriving from colloid of life, assembled as life colloid, making up all life as one life colloidal protein mat. Some of this biological mat moves, and the rest is more stationary as life form. Yet all is the same. Life colloid and immunity. Immunity is what recognizes you from what's other than you. The human immune complex is more than cell-mediated immunity, for there is also a biochemical-mediated immunity. Yet the body's immune system can have had challenge in dealing with antigen. Life colloid change form easily. Underpinning life food nutritional fasting and intestinal cleansing is the doctrine in colloidal biology of symbiosis and pleomorphism. Life colloid in mutual assistance is interchangeable. Life colloid can fractionate out of healthy body cell, tissue, and fluid that became overacid. Those life colloid arise from tissue and fluid within. Blood and tissue are vital in a healthy condition. Yet in an unhealthy condition, the blood can have become septic. Continuous viewing and the application of various lighting technique in microscopy highlight how life colloid contained within the blood of a relatively vital person, if subject to an overacid condition, life colloid of life-composing blood as an organ can easily aggregate, fuse, and differentiate into a 1,000-head monster. Fungi in food. Life colloid in food consumed contain the life colloid that composed that organism. The reason that corn, peanut, cashew, bean, grain, potato, banana, date, cane, milk product, and flesh is other than life food is because that food contains strange, undigestible life colloid and runaway sugar. That food is composed of life colloid that fractionate out of the red blood cell into aspergillus, chitomium, eurotium, fusarium, penicillium, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and trichoderma. Dysbiotic life colloid come in an enormous array of modern food presently eaten. All wheat, barley, corn, bean, milk, flesh, and potato has life colloid within that wherever the blood became congested in an area, that body area can have become a thousand-headed monster. Dead food from material wrongfully consumed leaks itself into the matrix where injury can have occurred. In life food, one can have consumed an ultimate element food, like a black radish, versus on a dead food diet, flesh and starch that has the lowest vibration as a food. True immunity is life food as a way of life. A true healing therapeutic involves one changing one's ways. Otherwise, dead food consumption, even in children, damage teeth and digestive organ, excite nerve cells to habitual action, dull one's spirit, and eventually can have led to death. A life colloidal spore is a building block of a cell and body tissue. Spore can have a chemical affinity with body cell and tissue internal structure. Protein bands of the body from dysbiotic spore fractionated out of blood cells and blood can be so similar with healthy tissue that cross-reactivity happens and immune challenge can have occurred. An enormous amount of house cleaning goes on within the body. Cleanliness and good hygiene is equivalent to God. An enormous number of immune cells as life colloid daily do what they can to crawl into and keep clean micro niches. The body's own immune life colloid as a B cell, T cell, and NK cells assist to clear all dysbiotic life colloid. The body's life colloid immune cells originated of colloid of life from a red blood cell. All antigen, foreign material, is cleared by the body's immune system before it compromises the body. Vital immunity clears away dysbiotic life colloid, including spore, bacteria, mold, fungi, helminthes, protozoa, dysbiotic tissue, new toxin, etc. Component of dysbiotic material is made of protein or polysaccharide construction is called an antigen. That material is recognized by the immune system as foreign, and antibodies and lymphocytes specialize and target specific antigens. Plant and earth-based passifrin. Dysbiotic life colloid in the interior of the body's bioterrain and intestinal tract of the body is harmful. Antimicrobial compound, passifrin, is produced by friendly intestinal flora and body life colloid immune cells. Phytoterrestrial and marine passifrin can be brought in to assist the body to clear dysbiotic life colloid. A phytoterrestrial passifrin compound must be friendly to body tissue, yet clear dysbiotic life colloid. Phytoterrestrial and marine passifrin compound can be bactericidal, lyses dysbiotic life colloid, or it inhibits the growth of dysbiotic life colloid. Antibiosis is the action of natural passifrin that inhibit the growth of a particular life colloid. Symbiotic life colloid, as the body's flora eco-sterilize all dysbiotic life colloid as one's immunity is working fine. Life colloid is assimilated from life food containing life colloid, making up the plant and its soil. Life food still has genetic within itself to reproduce in nature. It has the ability to eco-sterilize against dysbiotic life colloid. For instance, when body tissue could have broken down into dysbiotic life colloid as Staphylococcus, life colloid in fruit like whole orange and cantaloupe can have an enormous array of natural passifrin, including penicillium. That occurring passifrin assists the body with antibiosis. Soil-borne life colloid like streptomyces and phytoplankton in the soil produce passifrin bacteriostatic effect as well as producing such element as powerful antioxidant and immune-stimulating compound, interleukin. Life colloid has B17 that assists the body to clear away a neoplastic cell. It also clears away all low-energy tissue. Neoplasm and low-energy body structure is missing its component biophoton-rich monatomic element. See Secrets of an Alkaline Body. Health has cells containing monatomic element that protect from the otherwise selective cytotoxic action of B17. B17 is applied in the body as what is consumed is in its life food state, as B17 is heat unstable. Phytoterrestrial passifrin, as mentioned above, has two combative strategies to clear a pathogen. Dysbiotic life colloid can be lysed, bactericidal, or their growth can be inhibited, bacteriostatic. In the later approach, the host's immune system applies phagocytosis and antibodies to clear pathogen. Some life colloidal pathogen have a cell wall and others are without a wall, mycoplasma. A life colloidal bacteria cell wall is made up of double spore forming macromolecule called peptidoglycan. Some phytoterrestrial passifrin compound inhibit peptidoglycan synthesis. Dysbiotic life colloid can also have their ability to manufacture protein inhibited another way. Phytoterrestrial and marine passifrin clear dysbiotic life colloid by changing the plasma membrane permeability. That process disrupts the dysbiotic life colloid metabolism. Metabolite, such as enzyme, necessary for dysbiotic life colloidal metabolism, can be interfered with by phytoterrestrial passifrin compound, also preventing the growth of dysbiotic life colloidal organisms. A pathogen requires folate. A phytoterrestrial passifrin compound can inhibit folate synthesis of dysbiotic life colloid, thereby inhibiting its ability to produce nucleic and amino acid. Phytoterrestrial passifrin assists the body by being anti-helminthic, anti-protozoa, anti-spore, antifungal, enzyme inhibitor, antimetabolite, plasma membrane inhibitor, nucleic acid inhibitor, protein inhibitor, cell wall inhibitor. Healthy plant and soil contain natural passifrins. Eco-sterilization is how a biofilm colony protects itself from its environment. Natural passifrin produced by plant, soil, and marine biofilm life colloid do a whole array of things above the beyond list, including vitamin, mineral, whole food passifrin. Some passifrin work through inhibiting the dysbiotic life colloid in protein synthesis, affecting membrane permeability. Antifungal passifrin affect fungal cell permeability. Biophoton combine colloid of life that assist the body with immunity by clearing away electrical resistance. Healthy life colloid, spore, pair up with the life colloid making up dysbiotic spore, bacteria, mold, fungus, and yeast. This affects the more advanced dysbiotic form to be reduced back to its less evolved component, life, as a symbiotic life colloid. The body's immunity is primarily due to its biofilm. Yet as this biofilm other than remained integrous through wrong living and injury, it creates an opportunistic pathogen condition to have arisen. Antigen-antibody complexes in a healthy biofilm assist to remove noxious agent from the body biofilm by coating with antibodies. The foreign cell is then destroyed by immune cells. Complement activation reactive protein coat the infectious agent, and IgG and IgM antibodies cause lysis of the cell membrane. Blocking antigen attachment. Generating antibodies that clump antigen together for easy ingestion by phagocytes. Life colloid can produce asexually and or sexually. Component life colloidal spore making up a dysbiotic bacteria, mold, fungus, and yeast, as already indicated, can have sexually been mated with by primitive vital life colloidal body flora. This action reduces dysbiotic life colloid to their symbiotic state as colloid of life, spore, and double spore. These three stages of the colloid of life cycle exist in the healthy state and are building blocks of a healthy body. Unicellular algae, in a similar way as above, aggregate in a freshwater sponge and fuse and differentiate into a sponge cell or leukocyte. The sponge becomes a living hotel for an enormous array of symbiotic life colloid, including spore, bacteria, mold, fungus, yeast, ciliate, and diatoms. Life food is a life free of hazardous protein. Life food is the discovery that starch, milk, and flesh-free diet can relieve and prevent ailment, including cancer, autoimmune disease, arteriosclerotic plaque, bile occlusion, digestive disturbance, obesity, blood sugar challenge, neural disorder, pain, and infertility. The Jubbs take the view that any condition is other than a disease. All body condition is a biological response modification that is either in an active phase or a resolution phase. Bread, potato, rice, corn, bean, cheese, and flesh has been applied as the staff of life. Most humans are eating that food every day. There is undeniable evidence, though, that those foods are supplying the body with strange indigestible protein that has negatively affected health to the tune of causing some 220,000 premature deaths every 2 months in the United States alone. One could say that those foods are the primary drugs people consume that cause death. A starch, cooked dairy, and flesh diet is keeping people in the hospital. A high starch, cooked dairy, and flesh diet increases the risk of cardiovascular, osteoporosis, and kidney disorder in relationship to life food. One could say that those foods are the primary drugs people consume that cause death. Life food is complete and full of enzyme, antioxidant, vitamin, and mineral in a bioactive state and leads to a sustainable future. The standard American diet, SAD, does quite the opposite. Selective growing over some 10,000 years has caused some common food eaten to lack genetic ability to eco-sterilize mold, fungus, and yeast in nature. The banana is a classic example of how, through a lack of its biodiversity, is unable to cope with environmental stresses. Only 50% of what is grown survives insects, mold, fungus, and yeast to be sold. A sterile mutant crop can generate more edible food. Viable C of the ancestral wild stock is a mere vague trace now of the past. Defenseless banana plantation now feeds the world its most favorite fruit. From lack of genetic integrity, the banana will be bred out of existence shortly. Modern people then may other than feel great about eating an original banana. It is pithy, full of seed with very little fruit. The banana, like wheat, corn, rice, barley, spelt, kamut, oat, cane sugar, beet, date, pineapple, and potato, have a very high glycotic rate. Sugar in the blood. Protein and sugar molecule in these hybridized food, including gluten, gliadin, glutenin, and disaccharide sugar, cause symptom seemingly far related. Healing occurs for a whole range of health challenge as one is on a program that has eliminated starch, flesh, cooked food, dairy, and egg. An unknown sensitivity to strange protein, fat, and carbohydrate in flesh, dairy, egg, and starch is the root cause of all autoimmune condition and other physical and psychological condition. A specific test for gluten gliadin sensitivity include transglutaminase (TG), endomysial antibodies (EMA), anti-gliadin antibody (AGA). Human gatherer ancestors ate a diet free of starch, flesh, or cooked food. Cooking grain, dairy, and flesh only accounts for 3 or 4 steps at the end of walking for 3 full days, as far as human evolution is concerned. That is hardly enough time for the body to biologically adapt to itself to have managed that dead food. Understanding the relationship of strange protein and hepatic, liver, insulin, cardiovascular, connective tissue, lymphatic, and autoimmune challenge can heal because it allows one to change one's ways. Health depends on the integrity of an internal, clean, optimized body state. One's eating can have allowed foreign protein to have escaped from the intestinal tract and lodged in the blood. Foreign protein, undigestible, hydrophobic, enzyme-resistant, and protein that has its 3-dimensional structure changed by hydrogen bond breakage during cooking that got into the blood can have wreaked havoc on the body day after day. Adequate dietary counseling and education theory is yet to have its true therapeutic effect. Belief, commercial, and politically motivated promotion is other than science. Fat floating and heavy sinking sticky stools of other than excellent absorption of food taken in. Human leukocyte antigen are strange proteins found on immune cells that identify susceptibility of health challenge due to dietary starch. A grain is an evolutionary error. Traits selected by nature allow individual life forms to survive, to reproduce. This involves a passing on of one's genes into the gene pool. Fit parents create fit offspring. A human digestive tract fits exactly into frugivore behavior. Some 12 million years ago, there was a divergence from knuckle walking to upright posture, distinguishing a human from other primate. Cooking flesh, Milking an animal and eating starchy food is all only a recent phenomena. People were without cooking until fire was controlled. Pot, pan, cup, and bowls only occurred recently. If one was meant to eat cooked food, one would have been born with a stove attached. Prior to 40,000 BC, people had other than ever consumed grain and domesticated flesh and dairy. As evidenced in New Guinea, millions and millions of years have shaped the gene pool. Cooking is extremely harmful. The fact that cereal crops can other than be found growing in nature is a serious fact worth noting. Starch like wheat, corn, rice, potato, and the like, all other than can resist mold, fungus, and yeast in nature. Mold, fungus, and yeast, though, is the chief undertaker. If that food can other than contain mold, fungus, and yeast in nature, how can it manage that situation in the body? Nutrient absorption, especially fat, is compromised by absorptive challenge set up by a small intestine that other can empty properly. Strange protein coming in from grain, bean, flesh, and cooked dairy initiate occlusion of the bile bladder because it acidifies cholesterol to have crystallized. Grain, flesh, and dairy eating is only a recent phenomenon. In total, consumption of that food may only represent less than 1% of human evolution. Symbionts and selective genetics. Genetic mutation is something, yet symbiosis, which is species combining, accounts for the greatest evolutionary change. A termite can only digest wood because it contains life form within its digestive tract that easily digests the plant protein cellulose of wood it has consumed. A human digestive tract fits in exactly into somatotyping as a frugivore, fruit eater. The evidence of spears, knives, and forks and clubs only goes back a small way in comparison to time spent evolving by having the habit of gathering fruit. Without a pot boiling in nature, nor a container to hold milk, humans evolved over eons. By habit formed from picking fruit. All other protein brought into the body, other than what evolution has allowed, is like thinking you can get a butterfly to swim. All cooked protein is harmful to human health. A possum is without a predator and can live twice as long as a possum with a predator. Human environmental stress, including new toxin, can play a major role in vitality. Brain size has shrunk with all domesticated animal. The arrival of hand tools 2.5 million years ago represents only 3 steps taken after walking for 3 days. Strange protein can be found on the end of human leukocyte antigen, HLA. Isolated groups of gatherers through recorded history shows lived long, healthy lives. Recent people, since spears, forks, clubs, bowls, and cooking utensils, came to appreciate the opiate-like comfort of these strange proteins. Undigested protein in the blood acts as an endogenous opiate in the human body. Peptide in starch and casein in milk all act as morphine or heroin does, as it would have entered the bloodstream. These end up stimulating an immune response. Exorphin, strange opiates, from undigestible protein entering the blood stimulates a body-adaptive phase of comfort. Clearly, a nutrient-rich gatherer had a large brain and lived much longer and was 5 to 6 inches taller in stature than agrarian cultures eating flesh, grain, egg, dairy, grain like rye, produce the fungus ergot, which produces a mycotoxin called lysergic acid, LSD. These foods can have caused all manner of being other than integrated. A cannibalism of the brain and gut can have occurred. Human leukocyte antigen, HLA, is associated with susceptibility to a wide variety of health challenge. DQ2 and DQ8 HLA is found in more than 90% of all celiac sufferers. The mucus layer on the intestinal wall assists to produce the bloodstream from those volatile proteins. Blood seen under a microscope shows much undigested debris from eating a dead food diet. Undigested protein cause the formation of HLA and inflammation at the site of the strange protein absorption into the blood of the body. Intestinal permeability, abnormally leaky gut syndrome, LGS, results from eating a non-life food diet. Mold, fungus, and mycelial thread can have grown through the intestinal tract, causing undigested, strange protein to have entered the blood. These strange proteins wreak havoc on the body. Absorption in the intestinal tract occurs in an area that is equivalent to the surface area of a tennis court. The mucosal lining in the intestinal tract provides us with enzymes, nascent hydrogen gas, prostaglandin, neurotransmitter, hormone, and leukocyte that aid in intestinal digestion, immune, heart, and brain function. In the ability of manufacturing of blood and acts as a pH buffer. A protection of the interior of the body from strange protein, mycotoxin, mold, fungus, and yeast. A healthy new covering of cells occur every 2 days in a healthy intestinal tract. Function provided by the intestine can have become inhibited drastically by the onslaught of strange dietary protein having wrongfully entered the bloodstream. 7 hours can have passed by before the immune system can have responded. Spontaneous generation of life colloid. Protein from a living organism can have been heated to 100 degrees Celsius for 1 hour and it is completely denatured. The protein's three-dimensional structure is collapsed and enzyme-resistant linkages are formed in that protein. Protein from a living organism heated to 100 degrees Celsius perishes and denatures itself. Yet, if given some oxygen, bacteria as life colloid are spontaneously generated within this once heated protein medium. An extremophile is a life colloid that arose on the earth about 3.5 billion years ago. This tiny little critter is archaeo life colloid bacterium that can eat rock, transforming one material into another. An extremophile is an archaeo living in niches on the extreme edge of a hot thermal vent and other toxic chemical environments and the extreme cold and heat. Extremophile is a life colloid that assembles through a process of colloid of life aggregating. These aggregates fuse with other aggregates to eventually differentiate, specialize, and become bacteria. This is life arising out of an environment dissipative medium. Colloidal biology posits that colloid of life as inorganic matter form into organic matter. This is what composes all organisms as life colloid. Cosmic energy is condensed into light matter, and light matter is condensed into life by one's body flora. Flesh, potato, wheat, corn, bean, and cane sugar is composed of teeming C-dysbiotic colloid of life. Dysbiotic colloid of life. When cooked, given the right environment, these colloid of life assemble into life colloid as putrefactive, fermentive, rancid bacteria and spore. Colloid of life aggregate together like organisms do that colonize coral reefs. These life colloid spore aggregates become fused with other aggregates and begin to display metabolic feats as life colloid. As condition supports life, there is a spontaneous generation of life colloid from cooked denatured protein. Protein, DNA, RNA, and other cellular material is newly synthesized continuously. The transition of stillness to an animated state is continuous. One can easily witness an erythrocyte, red blood cell, putrefying and life colloid having assembled from fused spore made of colloid of life given the right environment. One can witness, with a special lighting technique, the microscopic process of colloid of life that compose the red blood cell assembling into an immune cell flora bacterium, an immune cell or a bacterium as a life colloid. Life can be between living and another than living state. A boiled potato after 3 days has potato bacilli, well formed, swarming on its surface, skin, and deeper into the potato. These starch granules can be seen to be in transitional phases. Life colloid can have fused together without a cell wall. And then life colloid are formed also with definite cell wall boundaries. Put in the right environment, bean and milk product that is cooked at 100 degrees Celsius for up to 1 hour can give rise to life colloid that is specific to the culture medium. Kept at a moderate temperature, filtered water and air, microscopic investigation clearly shows shaped cell fragment in the blood transform into coccus and bacillus type life colloid. Putrefied blood bacilli of an innumerable amount assemble in the interior of the spent red blood cell. These life colloid as circular vacuole transform into numerous typical life colloid bacilli within days. DNA and RNA and life colloid with nuclei change rapidly. Life colloid is spontaneously generated from spent red blood cells having pooled to become a monera. Life colloid is proliferated through a process of colloid of life aggregates. These aggregates fuse with other aggregates. Then these fused masses of aggregated aggregates of life colloid differentiate, specialize its shape. This all occurs without life form dividing or requiring any mitotic cell division. Life colloid that arise have characteristic based on their culture media. Dead food protein from flesh and dairy break down into dysbiotic microbe that secrete ptomaine, which is just one mycotoxin that develops out of the culture medium in the digestive tract of that food. Spores, virus, that make up cellular structure and are a body flora below the level of bacteria, exist as life colloid in a healthy body. These spores are spontaneously generated by the protoplasm of cells going through an autocatalytic reaction in a toxic terrain. Flesh putrefies into putrefactive life colloidal bacteria that excrete skatole, indole, catevin, and ptomaine toxin. That is to name only a few mycotoxin excreted. The characteristic form of the type of life colloidal bacteria present in the digestive tract depends on the physiochemical properties of the culture medium. The elementary flora of the body is composed of colloid of life, including the life colloid that make up the cell structure and also blood. An injured body that has decreased vital essence can have this body flora transform from its usual symbiotic relationship into a dysbiotic, pathological state. Infectious disease is due to a spontaneous generation of symbiotic colloid of life and life colloid into dysbiotic form. A spore, virus, is autocatalytically created from the body flora substrate, aggregating, fusing, and differentiating as protein of that life form breaks down. One can recover if a disease is slight. Yet if a body condition was without vitality, it can have fractioned into dysbiotic spore, cell, and body structure is composed of. Life colloid as spore is the biological elemental component part between what is animated and other than animated. Spore is spontaneously generated from the protoplasm of blood going through an autocatalytic reaction as when it would have broken down. Pathological condition of the blood and body predominantly arise from the gastrointestinal content resulting in dysentery and typhoid-like bacilli having arisen from the substrate of the intestine. Change of healthy tissue to pathological only requires physiological chemical stress. Lung tissue breaks down into a tubercle bacilli and intestinal mucous membrane into dysentery and typhoid-like bacilli. Abnormal putrefaction occurring close to a mucous membrane can cause adaptive dysbiotic life colloid to arise at that site. Those dysbiotic life colloid can then become greatly spontaneously generated where vitality is other than kept. Septicemia and suppurative inflammation is the result of the symbiotic life colloid spontaneously transforming into dysbiotic form. A blood corpuscle can have spontaneously transformed into dysbiotic life colloid without any inoculation necessary. Colloidal biology is the insight of colloid of life and life colloid being a primal building block of life below the level of a cell. This is a new principle of biology that is a turning point that confronts the old view of a cell only being able to arise only from a cell. Disease is other than due to the microorganism infection. Blood hygiene is what keeps infection at bay, along with immune cell vitality. A body cell swimming in antibiotic and petroleum disinfected plasma is a compromised system. Protozoa eating into an erythrocyte and then multiplying by binary fission is a false doctrine. For in colloidal biology, the red blood cell first displays a pathogenic state and it freely transforms into protozoa after that. The cell of the body in death freely degenerate into the primal flora they are composed of, drawing energy from fermentation rather than aerobic metabolism. Symbiotic life colloid of a healthy cell in a toxic terrain reverse differentiates into primitive dysbiotic anaerobic life colloid. Without intrusion from the outside, dysbiotic life colloid are spontaneously generated. Pathogenic life colloid as spore, bacteria, mold, fungus, and yeast is the freely formed effect of disease and are other than its cause. Pathogenic life colloid freely form from the symbiotic life colloid that compose healthy cells. Colloid of life assemble into life colloid by life forms that can manage that toxic terrain. Eventually, one's body is recycled back into the colloid of life. Life colloidal proliferation can arise up out of an organic and inorganic medium. All else that is required is water, air, proper temperature, and time. Even Darwin was completely perplexed when it came to explaining the origin of the unicellular life colloid. In vitality, the blood is kept hygienic. Otherwise, the blood can have putrefied. Phase contrast microscopic investigation shows transitional forms of life colloid arising first out of minute blood protein, particle, and cellular debris into saprogenous life colloid. Life colloid can be seen through aggregation, fusion, and differentiation process from the red blood cell cytoplasmic extrusion. Dysbiotic life colloid arise up out of spent putrefying leukocyte. Cell cytoplasm degenerate into spore, and then degenerating body cell nuclei become a mass of bacterial life colloid. Individual bacterium as life colloid can detach from the mass and be seen to swim away. All this without any inoculation from the outside. Spores and bacteria as life colloid spontaneously arises from life colloid. Urine heated to 180 degrees Celsius and properly sterilized will, in given time, become turbid. A starch granule from a baked potato or rice cooked at 130 degrees Celsius becomes bacteria given the right temperature, moisture, and air. Bacteria is spontaneously generated from the denatured organic heated matter given the right environment. In the same manner, bacteria is spontaneously generated from a decomposing red blood corpuscles in any stagnant area of the body. A sophisticated microscope can be used today to discover the transition from organic matter to life. One can witness the transition of any denatured organic matter, like the potato or rice, go from being without life to having bacterium with life. A starch granule assembles into bacteria even if the potato or rice was cooked to 130 degrees Celsius. Bacteria that arise depend upon the culture media. One's digestive tract is home to friendly and unfriendly life colloid, depending on the culture media. Life food breaks down into acidophilus bacteria, whereas flesh breaks down into dysbiotic bacteria. Gastrointestinal content, being full of denatured food, coupled with a history of unbalanced living, can have precipitated the gastrointestinal content to transform into a typhoid or cholera bacilli. All this without inoculation. A lung and gastrointestinal tract cell membrane can be free of offending pathogen, yet bacteria that is dysbiotic can arise upon stress of that tissue. Human body substance can be likened to a cooked potato or rice that can have easily become bacteria. Clostridia dysbiotic can have been other than kept at bay, and Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, and Bacillus coli, symbiotic, can have been other than kept properly in the intestine. Symbiotic bacteria excrete useful component, yet dysbiotic bacteria excrete mycotoxin that can have had a less than excellent effect on the body. Having eaten to excess and late at night causes a cooler abdomen peripherally, and pathological change can have occurred to the gastrointestinal media. Both cholera and typhoid-like bacilli is spontaneously generated from the content of dead food putrefied and stagnant in the intestinal tract. Intestinal content can have changed the chemical constitution, and adapted life colloid arise out of that media. Stress of other kind, like autonomic nervous system stress of the lung or intestinal tract, can have caused dysbiotic bacteria to arise directly out of stressed body cell, colloid, tuberculosis, and typhoid-like bacilli. Inflammation and infection is brought about as a result of dysbiotic life food being spontaneously generated. Blood and body cell protoplasm assemble, fuse, and differentiate into other life colloidal form that is shaped by the chemical nature of the site. Blood less than clean is the very cause of infection. Blood and its constituent in an acid terrain generate spontaneously into dysbiotic life colloid. Bacterial infection requires oxygen or air, warmth, water, and an organic substance along with time for life colloid within the substrate media to coalesce into life colloid, growing and moving around noticeably, this when observed under a microscope. Inert, apparently, cooked and denatured food only takes time and ripe condition mentioned earlier to transform into a life colloid as spore and bacilli. Colloid of life aggregate into tiny spore. Those spore aggregate and fuse to make up a bacteria. Water and cell salt is maintained during Jubb cell rejuvenation because the program acts as a slight diuretic. Nutrition is reduced in volume and made easy to digest, and the time taken for processing nutrient is quickened. Transit time of food through the intestine requires it to occur in under 12 hours. Beyond Darwinism is the origin of a unicellular organism. Beyond Darwinism is the reality of a life form having evolved through a symbiotic merger. This is life awash microscopically of the ordinarily unseen world of life colloid. The Jubbs call this field of investigation colloidal biology. Colloidal biology is about the definition of a cell and the origin of a body cell. Colloidal biology is the recognition of a process of colloid of life aggregating to form a spore, virus, and a spore aggregating and fusing to create bacteria. Bacteria develop a hardened outer wall and transforms into a mold. Mold transform into a fungus as mold grows in a colony. The culmination of this life form is a yeast. All these life forms are life colloid made up out of colloid of life. As one can have found advanced forms of life colloid as yeast in the blood and interior of the body, the more vital cleansing becomes. Yeast-like bacteria can be a useful variety or something else. Useful yeast grows through budding and fusion. Dysbiotic yeast grows through a process of sporalization. It spreads itself through a spore, like penicillin or Candida albicans does. Blood-borne inhibitor keep only body-friendly life colloid present. Colloid of life beyond the body's own cells are generally kept at an aggregated organelle spore state, a body flora all making up the interior of cells. This is a state of being before coming a dysbiotic spore, bacteria, mold, fungus, or yeast, or body cell. Microscopically, DNA and RNA is synthesized without the prior presence of nucleic acid. Life arises from life colloid symbiotically having created a merger and thus a new form. A cell is a symbiotic merger of life colloid organized together to make a whole body. Life arises from the seemingly inanimate, from the stillness, sterilized, organic, substrate material. Life arises given the proper environment. A cell has learned temperature control to assist the body. Each cell of the body arose mostly from a red blood cell originally. This occurred without mitotic cell division necessary. A cell is composed of life colloid that can be individually found in the environment. Life colloid that make up body cell have their own DNA and reproductive schedule. This is DNA beyond cellular DNA. This is mitochondria and other organelle DNA living inside a cell. Life colloid as mitochondria are energy generators living within a cell and provide the body with cell spare electron to pump disorder out. The first cell in an egg forms from having been a red blood cell originally. Blood in a state of health is manufactured from the intestinal mucosa from a process of colloid of life aggregating, fusing, and differentiating, changing form. Transformation from healthy to unhealthy life colloid is a matter of environment. The environment needs only to have other than kept its alkalinity. Digestion of foodstuff requires microorganism in the intestine. In good health, the digestive tract where blood is formed requires lactobacilli, acidophilus, and bifidobacterium. A blood cell can have become fixed in the body and colloid of a red blood cell pool become a monera, a protoplasmic mass. A nucleated cell, a beginning new immune cell, white blood cell, can arise out of a monera. A red blood cell is simply a precellular element that can differentiate into all body cells. Disease is resolved by healing up all celiac condition. A body cell has a way to maintain an even temperature. Otherwise, life colloid fuse and coagulate, and cellular structure other than remain. Once colloidal tissue can have become coagulated, there is little turning that condition back. Blood putrefies and ferments in a stagnant body area. Observed under a sophisticated microscope, debris from new toxin, putrefying blood and platelet, turn into a saprogenous life colloid. Life colloid evolve out of a cytoplasmic extrusion of a red blood cell. Dysbiotic life colloid arise directly out of the cellular extrusion of a white and red blood cell equally. A blood cell can have become a mass of dysbiotic life colloid, spore, bacteria, mold, fungus, and yeast. Most of life arises microscopically from a process of colloid of life aggregating to become a spore, virus. These colloidal aggregates then fuse together, forming double spore that fuse again to become a bacteria. Blood-borne inhibitor keep dysbiotic life colloidal body flora at a level only of the double spore. Blood-borne inhibitor block the expression of life colloid to the level of double spore. The primary colloid that make up the blood is colloid of life and life colloid. Red and white blood cells, fibrin, globulin, and albumin. Blood is primarily produced with the granular leukocyte situated in the intestinal wall from colloid of life, aggregating, fusing, and differentiating. Blood is a life colloidal, elementary building block of the body. This is beyond it simply having been considered a gas transporter only. Blood is made in a sporulation process, located in the lamina propria, inside vesicular and large cell structure in the small intestine. A red blood cell becomes a white blood cell. A white blood cell, like a phagocytic cell, make up about 12% of the dry weight of the liver. These phagocytic cells, Kupffer cells, produce albumin, the super transporter of the body. Florification and global sustainability. Human survival and global florification of farmland through life food agrarian practice and nutrition is an intelligent step toward a sustainable future. Otherwise, a rapid deforestation and desertification of agricultural land by agrochemical acid ionization of the soil will, in 30 or more years, have eroded the last calculated inch of topsoil left. 90% of the earth farmland is now seriously threatened. A great lake, river, and glacier is retreating, and the enormous reservoir of water in the underground aquifer is dwindling. Aggressive, warmongering, non-egalitarian culture is wreaking havoc on the soil. Inequalities of economy, where people of the earth, other than own their own money supply, have throughout history repeatedly destroyed the soil and the people. One votes in the art of the way one lives life, by what one purchases. It has taken a mere 100 years to devastate what has taken 500 years previously to accomplish. Yet, presently there are examples of communities where reforestation of the desert is occurring by planting trees. Dravidian villages 4,500 years ago used 2,500 herbal medicines and had some 400,000 varieties of seed that was grown in appropriate microclimates. 4,000 years later, irrigation digging made the soil saline and laid barren the precious topsoil. Once shade has been taken by trees having been cut from the earth, the soil is other than able to retain water in its surface. Today, a metal plow acidifies soil through ionization. The plow steals electricity from the soil. This soil is carried off into the rivers that have silted up, threatening flooding of a town. Agricultural collapse undermines all great civilization. Globally, great deserts in Australia, Asia, and India have been created by using up all remaining vegetation. Agricultural practice exemplifies core societal value that through time desertification followed seasonally. The earth is rapidly becoming a desert, every expanded by a relentless non-egalitarian system. Trees are being cut down to pay faraway bankers. Meanwhile, every year that goes by, more hazardous waste is turned magically into fertilizer. Costly to dispose, hazardous material in one silo is thinly spread out over the arable farmlands daily, unchecked at the present moment. An enormous ecological catastrophe will befall the earth unless there is a movement immediately toward life food nutrition. This is the direction we all can turn to reach people while there is still time. Life food is food wherein a semblance of this food can still be found growing wild. It is food that is prepared and eaten with its life force intact, and also in a manner that is easy to digest. Choosing life food, nutrition, one is acting in a sustainable manner for the planet Earth. Life food is organic and mostly food from a flower, seed, nut, grass, and some fermented food. An animal is without need of conscious understanding of action. The world is full of animals actively seeking relief from disease. Action is merely linked with consequence. A monkey can find clay and charcoal to detoxify itself, and an insect seeks out plants to eco-sterilize against predatory flies. Birds use aromatic herb that vitalize offspring. Biodiversity is echoed by the realization of life being one interconnected whole. Each species has breathed and grown the atmosphere we have at present. Species diversity equals species breathing and growing what atmosphere exists. Monocropping, logging, and selling flesh to pay bankers is ruining the earth by other than allowing for biodiversity. Habitat conservation is at the heart of acting toward one economic egalitarian system and life food nutrition. This is the ancient architect's sense in how human beings evolved. Eating and drinking other than what hominids have habitually evolved to manage creates other than an easy situation for the evolved system and digestive apparatus. Biodiversity mirrored by an economic egalitarian system and life food nutrition is important for sustaining human and earth health. Banana, rice, potato, corn, cane, sugar, wheat, bean, flesh, cooked egg, and cow milk is unnatural living and is destructive to the earth's biodiversity. A human is other than within a natural biodiversity ecological system with that acid-forming food. That food is a drug, for it creates major, irreversible, physiological, harmful change in the body. Self-medication of an animal and all of life's biodiversity is sustained more by life food nutrition. For this is hominoid habit supporting the greatest conservation of nature. At the present moment, banana and other favorite food mentioned above is ostentatiously chomped monkey style between mechanical being to replace lost sugar. That is called the trail of the yellow peril. For the purity of the banana's unblemished skin and a perfect cob of corn involves a highly toxic, yet to be banned chemical. Power and profit of unnatural living on dead food ripens in the hand of the chief undertaker, mold, fungus, and yeast. Corn, soy, and other dead food cereal is produced presently mostly to grow flesh. Some 90% of all cereal grown on the earth is employed to feed flesh. To get a poultry pound of flesh, the average cow has 25 acres of land allocated in the modern system. Compare this to the third world, where the average person only owns 2 acres and feeds a family of 5. Fruit requires the least amount of land for the largest yield from that land. Flesh requires 5,214 gallons of water per pound. Tomatoes and grapes only require 20 to 70 gallons per pound of produce harvested. A life food-centered way of life is life where biodiversity supports ecological sustainability. One lives simply so that others can simply live. Karma-free food creates a more awakened consciousness. Prevention is better than curing. Vitality is interdependent on one's environment.